So, this is my third time recording this video. We are nearing the end of the boss guide playlist, and I'm starting to run out of things to say for these bosses. And I was ultimately kind of demotivated to make a video about Glumstone the Giant. It's nothing against the boss, I just didn't know what to say. I only like to make these guides when it's a boss I know I can fight easily and I know I have stuff to share. Now, yes, Glumstone the Giant is a very easy boss, but like I mentioned earlier, I don't really have much to share. So, 2 failed recording sessions later, here we are. And this time, it's gonna be different, because I took my time to S-rank Glumstone at least 30 different times, and here is what I've learned for each phase of the fight. Well, first off, your weapon of choice is ultimately up to you, because I found that multiple weapons can work for this fight. My trusty duo is Roundabout and Crackshot. I mean, there's really nothing that these weapons can't handle. And these weapons are coincidentally really good for this fight. Roundabout is very good at clearing the minions like the gnomes, and Crackshot is able to deal damage whenever you can't and also clears the gnomes really well, which are quite a nuisance during this fight. So it's better than 1 gnome killer, 2 gnome killers, especially with Crackshot's EX doing the same job as well. So basically your loadout is the Gnome Whacker 3000. You get the gnomes out of the way and deal as much damage to the boss as possible. And that's pretty much all you're doing for the entire fight, just in different ways. So I'd say the Gnome Whacker 3000 is a pretty safe bet for S-ranking Glumstone the Giant. To move on to your charm, many charms can work for this fight, but I don't see why you wouldn't want to use Heartring. With the incredible amount of parries throughout the entire fight, why would you not want to have free HP at your disposal? Feel free to use other charms like Coffee and Smoke Bomb, but if you're wanting to S-rank a boss, I don't know why you wouldn't want to bring the best charm for S-ranking bosses guaranteed. And I say guaranteed because it's literally the only requirement you'll have to worry about. The time requirement is extremely generous, the parries are very easy and plentiful, and if you're not getting the super meter requirements, then I think you need help. So the HP bonus is the only thing you actually have to worry about, so why not use Heartring? That's case closed, but again, use whatever you want, I'm not the one S-ranking the boss here, okay? Oh, and before I forget, bring whatever super you want, it really does not matter for this fight. Better yet, don't even bring a super, you really don't need it. At this point of the game, you should not be relying on supers at all for you to be getting S-ranks or do good in general. Because trust me, Heartring is more than enough. So why use your super when you can just spam EXs and get even more value and more damage? But if you're going to bring a super anyways, just please bring one that deals damage. But otherwise, don't bring one at all, you'll be fine. Well, with that, let's move on to the first phase. So when you first enter this fight, I found it most preferable to immediately dash to the rightmost rock pillar. This way, you'll start immediately and efficiently dealing damage to Glumstone. And in this position, you'll be able to dodge pretty much every attack thrown at you. Otherwise, you can do the exact opposite of this strat by going to the second leftmost pillar. That way, you can turn around with Roundabout and deal consistent damage while also having enough time and space to react to different attacks. And it also gives you more rock pillars to run to when in danger. Because throughout this phase, the rock pillars will move up and down unpredictably and will completely disappear once you've dealt enough damage to Glumstone. And by the end of the fight, there should only be 2 rock pillars remaining before he switches to his second phase. These quirks combined with the other dangers in the way can make each attack quite complicated to deal with. Which is why I believe it's very important to get good at not being on the pillars all the time. At some point throughout this phase, you're gonna have to run on the ground with the buried gnomes, which if you don't know, will poke out and damage you if you run over them. For example, during the geese crossing attack, you'll need to go on the ground to avoid the geese most likely, and then you can jump on the pillars and duck and you should be fine from there. You can also jump across the ground if you don't want as many gnomes popping up. So TLDR, you're gonna need to use the ground to avoid some attacks, including the bear attack as well while we're mentioning it. For that attack, Glumstone will bring a bear across the screen from left to right, and it'll stop at the 4th rock pillar. And typically during this part of the fight, you will probably have no 5th pillar. And that means you're gonna have to do a little dancing during this part. And by dancing I mean spamming jump and hoping to God you don't get hit. After you jump here around 2 or 3 times, you should be able to dash to the left and be fine. Another way of telling when it's fine to dash is when the bear notices he's about to get yeeted by Glumstone. I'm pretty sure at this point in the animation, the bear has lost its hitbox, which gives you the go-ahead to get the hell out of this area. Otherwise, this bear attack can be completely cancelled if you're near the end of the phase. If you deal enough damage to move on to the second phase while this attack is occurring, he'll completely stop what he's doing and yeet the bear. So along with this attack's low occurrence, it's pretty common to avoid this attack altogether. So I think it's about time we go over the two most common attacks, those being the Cauldron attack and the Gnomes. We've talked about the Bury Gnomes on the ground, but those Bury Gnomes can actually pop out completely and deal different types of attacks. Their main attack is to shoot a golden nugget in a random direction, but most likely being upwards. And sometimes those gnomes can climb up the pillars and make those pillars dangerous to stand on. Lucky for us, simply shooting the gnomes easily disposes of them. And both Roundabout and Crackshot are great for this as well. Typically, I'll turn around and shoot a couple Crackshots, and that's usually enough to deal with anything that is in the way. And of course, if you turn around and use Roundabout, it'll completely clear the stage for you. So I believe it's correct to say you have many ways of dealing with the gnomes. And with that, let's move on to the last attack, whatever this is. All you need to know is that pink and purple gas clouds will spawn and travel across the screen at various positions on the screen. Some will go way above your head, completely out of the way, and some will fly right by your feet. So the safest play in my opinion is to turn around with Roundabout and just deal casual damage while reacting accordingly, and then switching to Crackshot whenever you need to move. You could also just shoot Roundabout directly in Glumstone's face like I do, and then switch to Crackshot to deal with the gnomes. And I mean, I guess that's it? From this point on, it's ultimately up to you to deal with everything together and move on from the first phase. But a few quick notes before we move on. So like I mentioned earlier, if there are only 2 pillars remaining on the stage, that means that Glumstone is about to move on to his second phase. But I realized that the 2 remaining pillars will always be from the middle, which then also means that the outer 2 pillars will always be the first, second, or third pillar to go. So by the time the second pillar is gone, or by the first if you're a knower, you'll know which pillars are gonna go down next. Not super game breaking, but just very interesting to note. And another thing I wanted to note is be careful where you're shooting. Because you might think your shots hitting here is dealing damage to Glumstone, but in reality, it's not. Which is why I recommend jumping and shooting if you're really far back. Which is also why I prefer to stay up close and deal damage that way. Well, that's all there is to the first phase, so let's move on to the second phase. So, when I'm about to enter this phase, I like to either super or use my Crackshot EX. By the time the EX readies itself, the King Dice puppet should be out and it should be immediately dealing damage to it. That's just what I like to do because I like to be damage efficient. But feel free to do whatever you want. You can spam EXs, you can just do one Crackshot EX, or you can use them throughout the entire phase, it's up to you. And I'd actually recommend using Crackshot EX throughout this phase, because it's really good at clearing the gnomes that jump in the air. And speaking of EXs, Roundabout EX is also pretty good at dealing damage. So if there's any phase you're going to spam EXs, it would be this one. So the main problem with this phase is the gnomes again. And not only do they come from the ground this time, they come from the ground and jump in the air. And you could probably guess how bad this can go. So like I mentioned earlier, Crackshot EX is pretty good at handling these gnomes, and Roundabout achieves the same result. That good old Gnome Whacker 3000 coming in use. Other than the gnomes, you're gonna have to worry about the puppets throwing this ball back and forth between each other. This attack may be annoying at first, but it's quite easy to dodge once you know what you're looking for. In this case, the best position to be at depends on the height of the puppets. As a general rule, you always want to be around the puppet that is highest on the screen. That way you have the most room for when the ball is thrown. Try to stick to the highest puppet on the screen at all times, use Roundabout for direct damage, and in all other cases just spam Crackshot and you'll get past this phase somewhat easily. Oh boy, this video is starting to get a little bit long, so let's move on to the final phase. For this final phase, you'll get eaten by Glumstone and enter his stomach. And from here on out, you'll have to stand on 5 skull platforms that will disappear from this. This will shoot out either a drumstick or a bone. The skull platforms will eat these and they'll do something different depending on what they eat. If they eat the drumstick, they'll just simply disappear under the acid. But if they eat a bone, their mouth will stay open and their tongue will ring a bell. You'll have to parry this bell in order for all the platforms to come back up. And then you're just rinse and repeating this exact thing until you finally beat the fight. The only other thing you'll have to worry about are the scuba gnomes. How do they even get in here? Whatever. They'll proceed to jump out of the acid and shoot a dart at you, but they'll shoot the dart at various positions on the screen. So just make sure to avoid this one, including with all the bones and drumsticks as well. And I guess that's literally all there is to this phase. You'll want to be careful about standing on the sides of the screen because that's where the gnomes come from. And regarding the platforms, depending on your luck, sometimes the platforms are just way too far apart for you to not take damage, so that's why Heart Ring is really useful here. At this point in the fight, you should have more than enough health to take any damage that you need to. So don't feel afraid if you need to take a hit or two during this phase. As long as you have the health to do so, then just do it. And other than that, it's completely up to you to S-rank the boss yourself. Well, with that, that's how you S-rank Glumstone the Giant. I hope this video helped you out in some way, and if it did, please consider liking, subscribing, and sharing the video to help out the channel. And with that, I'll see you all in the next video.